This is All the Things with Michelle Wolf.
Welcome to this episode of All the Things. I am joined today with Valerie Rubin. Is it Valerie or Val? What do you like?
I go by either which.
Okay. And you are an anxious attachment specialist and trauma-informed somatic coach. Can you tell me a little bit about what that means?
Yes. So to be trauma informed is to truly understand the different complexities and intricacies of what trauma is, because you could be a therapist or coach, but you might not understand how to work with clients who have been through C-PTSD or extensive trauma. And people with a lot of anxiety need that extra support, and they need someone who is knowledgeable on how to support someone with a traumatized nervous system, because how you may work with someone who's traumatized versus someone who is not is a very completely different process.
And there's very real reasons for that. I mean, so, and as someone who has had trauma in her life, including child sexual trauma, and like having my boundaries violated a lot and not even understanding what that means. I'll never forget like going to like my first trauma therapist, and she's like talking to me about boundaries, and I'm like, what do you mean by boundaries? Because we just, we're used to having, so like learning all the things. And something as simple as, I mean, even for myself, like I'm a very loving and affectionate person. And learning that not everybody is, and that's not against me. Like just because I want to like put my hand on someone's shoulder, like that's not always welcome. And we've seen that play out politically, with sort of like that it's this assumption that it's okay to just touch people, but also that what people go through, even in something like a yoga class where doing some sort of stretching or somatic exercises, right? Like breathing into your body and being present with your body for the first time, maybe in a long time, can bring up stuff. And then how do you process that? So many things. So being able to guide someone through that and being aware of your impact along the way is so important.
Absolutely. And trauma is defined, one definition is too much too soon. And that could be very
Oh,
different.
I like that.
Yeah, that could be very different depending on each person's unique nervous system. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if you're doing a specific stretch in a yoga class, that might dysregulate you or trigger you in a certain way, or make you bring up memories that may be traumatic from your own childhood sexual abuse, etc. And so
Mm-hmm.
having someone who's aware of how to work with you slowly, because you can't just go right into a session with someone and just dive right into their deepest traumas. It's kind of like we need to work our way up slowly so that we're not re-traumatizing someone.
Yes, yes, yes. I will say something that was really effective for me, and this is kind of like side, but like EMDR, I love that.
Mhm.
Oh
Mhm.
my gosh, life-changing. For
Life
someone who
changing.
had like invasive flashbacks, that
Mhm.
were sometimes, and debilitating.
Mhm.
Um, and just in the moment, it's not like I walked around that way all the time, but like they'll just be out of nowhere. And you have to
Mhm.
like move through that. And it's like re-traumatizing each time. And that hits your nervous system. So like being able to work with your body, you know, yeah,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm. Absolutely. And yeah, EMDR is extremely life-changing. I'm currently training in somatic EMDR currently,
Oh, I
and
love that.
yes, it's very powerful, and that's just one of the modalities that
Mhm.
I'm trained and specialized in. But ultimately, with trauma, we need to make sure that we're meeting people and meeting clients where they are at. So that's just something that's very, very important. And with flashbacks, especially somatic EMDR and EMDR in general, it's helping you stay regulated
Mhm.
during your remembering that. And also with any type of trauma work, the brain doesn't realize the difference between real and imaginary. So when you're experiencing this flashback, it's happening
It's
in real
happening
time.
again. Mhm.
Mhm.
And that's why people think it's like, well, why do you have to, go there? It's so hard to explain, but it's like cell memory. It's like muscle memory. It's a neural pathway that's been, it's reinforced over and over again. And it takes real retraining to, rewire yourself, but you really can. I mean,
Mhm.
I can't remember and now like when those memories come up, it's not like they're gone, but I just don't experience them in the same way. The
Mhm.
emotional trigger is gone,
Mhm.
and it's not a numbness, it's an integration. Yeah.
Yes, that's a fantastic way of explaining it. It's more of an integration, not that it's
Mhm.
gone or you got rid of it. It's an
Right.
integrated experience. And I like to use the term like, when you're healing from something when the anxious thought or that anxious trigger or that flashback, you're indifferent to it if it comes
Mhm.
up again, or it's neutral, or it's no
Neutral.
longer
I like
controlling
that.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's no longer controlling your
It's like
behavior.
a neutral charge.
Mhm.
Because I kind of do think of our systems as like we're like these electromagnetic beings, very similar to computers. Our brains are amazing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Our whole system, of our operating. But it is malleable, like we can affect change. It takes
Mhm.
work. I mean, I last summer, and it's so important to do this reflection, like look at our lives and be like, okay, where was I a year ago and what was I like? And my gosh, a year ago, I was so anxious, and like I've done so much work over the years, but it's like it was a new level of, moving out of my house, being by myself after divorce, like all these things, starting a new job, like that makes you the way, and then processing. It's like, okay, what's the next layer of the onion that we're gonna
Mhm.
peel back? And where I'm at now, like it's like I have a new operating system, you know? People call that an upgrade or whatever, but it's a growth journey for sure.
Mhm. Yes, and it's a journey, right? I don't like the term like fully healed because like what does that even mean? It's really just exactly like you said, you're just continuing to peel back the onion. And if a same trigger or flashback comes up, it's showing you that your body feels safe enough to go into that deeper layer. A lot of people think they've regressed, they've done something wrong, it's come up again, but that's not true. You've actually built that safety in your nervous system to go even deeper into it.
It is, I will say I'm one of those people. It gets frustrating because you're like, I'm here again. But I will say I have seen myself get through those, like my pit of despair, I'll call it. Like I don't stay so long in there. And I can
Mhm.
get out of it much easier. And I have tools and I have a support system. And I'm like, wow, okay, you know, you can get to the other side. And now it's kind of like that I know that and I trust that about myself and about life. It's like, okay, I think whatever's coming,
Mhm.
it makes it easier to deal with the unknown, which is
Mhm.
scary for all of us.
Mhm. Absolutely, and that's a true sign of healing is if maybe last year, for example, maybe you would have stayed stuck in that anxious spiral or in that anxious
Hmm.
state for days or weeks or months, but now
Yeah.
you're able to condense that time. Maybe you're only stuck in it for a day, maybe for an hour, maybe 10 minutes because you have a new
Yep.
rewired nervous system to handle that capacity of stress or uncertainty.
And it's interesting, like, I learned so much about the anxious avoidant dance. And I can see why, even in terms of the polarity of that, but also the mutual learning. That is a really beautiful thing that can come from that if you have two willing participants. I guess it doesn't have
Mhm.
to be two. We don't have to limit it, but willing participants in that dance. It takes communication and I think, just an inclination to be curious and want to grow even yourself. So,
Mhm. Absolutely, and when it comes to the anxious avoidant dance and a lot of people who describe themselves as anxiously attached or are more anxious leaning, they will attract people who may be more avoidantly attached. But it doesn't really matter what the labels are as long as you both, like you
mhm,
said, are willing to put in that growth, that effort to learn how to best support one another so that you can both heal and grow together. Because the anxious and avoidant, both of them, their core wound is fearing abandonment
Mm-hmm.
and not having the tools to regulate their nervous system and process their emotions. So as you are both on your healing journey, this both helps you to learn how to build capacity. Both of them, their growth is how to learn how to be with these sensations. The avoidant just runs away from the threat. The anxious person will just move toward it. So we
Mm-hmm.
want to build our capacity so that we can support each other.
And it really is different. Like what's happening in the brain and in the body is a very different experience. And having learned that, it's like, it let me take it less personally. Because I was
Mm-hmm.
like, we just go to different places. And even now, I'm glad that you said it doesn't really matter the label either, because it really doesn't. Like we're all like on some sort of spectrum in this. And I've learned actually that while I lean avoidant, I lean anxious. I have avoidant tendencies too. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
we're really not all one thing or the other. Um, and it's learning to like meet in the middle, and give a little. Like I'm so much better at giving space now. I used to really struggle and I could see that and I was like, man, and in loving him, like I want to give him space, because
Mm-hmm.
I know he needs that and that's his way of processing life. Um, and because he knows more about me, he'll be more proactive in telling me things. And it's like, okay, and I thank him for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you like feed it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I love what you said because it's a spectrum. I've worked
Hmm.
with many anxious and avoidant folks. And when I've worked with people who are more avoidant leaning, as we heal more and more, they actually turn out to be more anxiously attached as they're healing. Because if we go from a polyvagal theory perspective, we
Hmm.
have this ladder where we're at freeze on the bottom. In the middle is that activated state, that fight, flight, anxious state. And then at the top is something called ventral vagal, aka feeling safe, feeling calm, feeling connected to those around you and yourself. So when you are in this activated state, the avoidant is in freeze and the anxious is in sympathetic fight or
Yes,
flight.
I love that you're speaking to
Yes. And
this.
so our nervous system is reflected in our attachment system and attachment style. So
Yeah.
these are all things that are not fixed. We're a spectrum. So as I've worked with a lot of avoidantly attached folks, I'm able to bring them up to the ladder more into that anxious state and then into ventral vagal to that calm,
Hmm.
secure place. And so if you have two willing participants to do that work together, two people in a relationship to work together, that's when real healing happens.
Oh, it's so
That's when real healing
beautiful.
happens.
And it's
Mhm.
so cool too. I mean, just to be, it's not without challenge, but I don't know. I don't
Mhm.
know that life, like, I think I've just kind of accepted that, like, that's part of life. Um,
Mhm.
but that we do need, like, we talked about this earlier, we do need each other. Like I
Mhm.
was saying, I am a pretty self-aware person, self-conscious. But like I need people to show me my blind spots too. And we talked a little bit about, having friendships or relationships in our close circle that you can have those like honest conversations and get that feedback. Those are my best relationships and my safest relationships, really.
Mhm. Absolutely, because we experience trauma as a child, not because we're doing something to ourselves, but because trauma is happening from a relational standpoint. Someone is might be doing something to you. So the
Or
trauma is
around you
happening
that you're witnessing. Yeah.
exactly, or around you. So because this trauma is occurring in relationships, it can be truly healed and integrated in
In
relationships with
relationships.
safe people.
And this idea that like I see it sometimes like you can only love someone as much as you love yourself. Yes, maybe. And, I love people pretty deeply and I struggled to love myself for a long time. And,
Mhm.
although I will say now that I do, like, I really love myself now. And I feel like I have a deeper capacity even, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't real and deep before. We don't need to limit
Mhm.
ourselves. And also this idea that we shouldn't be in relationship if we are not healed. Like, no, we heal we can't do it without each other. So,
Right. Right, absolutely, you can't do it without each other, and also, like, that relationship might not be romantic, it could be secure
yes,
friendships, you
absolutely.
know? And so it's all different, and just we need to kind of ignore this rhetoric that, like, we heal alone,
Hmm.
and, because that's just not the case, and healing is so imperative to everyone involved. It's just so imperative.
Um, I'm looking at some of the notes that I took on this this envelope from our call. There's so much. Oh my gosh. I don't know if we would talk about it all. We talked about um healing in community.
Mhm.
I feel like community is so vital. And that's why like I wanted to do this and have these conversations. And I love how we can support each other in these ways.
Mhm. Absolutely. Community is so essential because when we are overloaded with too much stress, it's like, how can we also increase our capacity with the stress by having other people to support us
Hmm.
through it? Like, I think about a lot with postpartum, women who have postpartum depression or anxiety. A lot of it is because we don't have those supportive people that help us share the load. And then it's like, no wonder why women feel so burdened and exhausted, anxious, and depressed. It's
Mm.
like we need these things. We need collaboration, community. We're
I
social
will say
creatures.
it was eye-opening after having a child. And I mean, I mean, even at the time, like a relatively strong family support system and, like definitely issues and things like that. But I, it's very isolating and you feel like such a burden sometimes and you're trying to hold so much together. It's a lot. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. That sounds like a lot. How did
Hmm.
you move through that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's when I really started my trauma healing journey. And it was really the catalyst of having my son that sort of opened me up to, because when you experience trauma and it's part of your raising,
Mhm,
it becomes sort of normalized. And you tell these stories and people will listen to them and to you they're like funny, but to other people they're like, wow. And so when you start getting that feedback, you're like, wow. And then but when you have your own child, that's really eye-opening.
mhm,
So yeah, I started with counseling and oh my gosh, I've been so lucky to have such great counselors over the years. I mean, I've had a few. You have to sometimes work through, what feels right for you, but that's how you learn boundaries and like
mhm,
what's right for you.
mhm,
Um, I've definitely had a few that in hindsight, you like move through an experience, and you're like, in hindsight, I don't feel good about that.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
but then you just work through
mhm.
it.
Absolutely, and our bodies are so intelligent. It will tell us what feels right and what doesn't.
Yes. Oh my
And
gosh. Mhm.
and that's what I really help clients through who are stuck in that fond people pleasing response because they learn that I'm responsible for others' needs, wants, emotions, and feelings.
Yes.
And then they hyper attune to other and then abandon their own needs and wants and feelings. And that leaves them completely disconnected from their intuition and from their knowing and their
Uh,
body.
I feel like that's the chapter that I just closed. Like,
Mhm.
was that self-abandonment and learning what that feels like. Because when that's part of your conditioned state, when you talk about boundaries, like you don't really know, like, because you
Mhm.
think you want to do it, but you don't even realize where that drive comes from. So then just getting curious with yourself is that's been like my life-saving grace is just like, just the curiosity of like, why do I do this? How does this
Mhm.
feel in my body? I just start asking myself questions. What's underneath this feeling?
Absolutely. Being curious instead of judging, that's
Yes.
really also a lot of healing. And if you are struggling with like judging yourself, that's just a part of you. That's not
Hmm.
your entire self. That's not who you are. And I have with clients, I have them almost imagine this shaming part or judgment part outside of their body in giving it a shape or color. A lot of the like I did that with a client this morning and she described it as a hot red circle and
Mm.
it had perfect angles and it symbolized she had to be perfect growing up in order to receive love. And talking with this part and just having it step to the side so we can explore what's driving this judgment and shame part of you.
Yes, definitely. Oh my gosh. So for me, she's my shame girl. But for
Mhm.
me, like it's been an act of like embracing her. And so
Mhm.
like integrating all the parts of me, like I feel so much more whole
Mhm.
now, than before.
That's
Um,
amazing.
it is. It's been so liberating, really. I can't say, I mean, because for me, it was always really heavy to carry that all the time, you
Mhm.
know?
It is heavy and it's not even ours. Like this, and I love that you said shamey girl or shaming girl
Same girl.
because shame girl, yes, because when you're giving it a name, it kind of takes away its power and you're almost seeing it
It's
outside
not
of
so
you.
big.
Yeah, you're not merged with it. So that's really, really key there
Yeah.
to see it outside of you because it's not you.
It was important. I did this, I forget where it might have been through a counselor slash coach that I work with. And we talked about like the exiled parts of us, like the parts of us we
Mhm.
don't want, to necessarily embrace about us, but like learning to embrace all of who I am, including all those parts too that aren't quote unquote perfect, because
Mhm.
that's all part. I've just embraced the human experience because we
Mhm.
all have it, all
Mhm.
of us.
Mhm. We all got them. We all
Mhm.
got them.
It's our
You're
connection.
Yeah, and a lot of people have this perfectionistic part, and we are like, we have to show up perfect to be loved. But like a lot
Mhm.
of people, that's why a lot of people love podcasts and love Instagram and connecting with people because they show us that we're not alone in our struggles and
Mhm.
experiences.
I think that's one of the things that I love about TikTok even, and why TikTok has exploded the way that it is. And because, it's even controversial, but it's like you get to see people just peopling. And
Mhm.
I laugh, I cry, I go through like a whole range of emotions just but I remember during COVID when TikTok really, just came out, and I was like so impressed with the innovation and creativity of people to find ways to connect during a time of disconnection. So,
Mhm. Absolutely, because humans need that connection. And when we can see other people, in your words, peopling, like showing their true, authentic self on that type of platform, that encourages us to step into it.
yeah. And I think that's why I feel so compelled to like share my stuff, that it's like I'm not perfect. I've made lots of mistakes. I've done, all kinds of things. I've had this journey. But I know that just like I read somebody else's story and learn something from it, and it's helped me in very profound ways. You know, something from this might help somebody who struggles with PTSD or flashbacks or depression and anxiety or whatever. They struggle with relationships and making connections and feel alone,
Mhm.
that they know they're
Absolutely.
not. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, what can we offer? What do you want to leave everybody with?
Yeah, I would say that you make sense. You make sense. And everyone comes to me and says, I feel broken. I just don't feel good enough because my anxious patterns, because of this anxiety, because of whatever I'm going through. And everyone tells me the story that they feel so alone in it, when in reality, you're not. And literally, that's why people come to me is to work on these exact patterns over and over again. So, like, know that you are not alone in whatever you are going through, and you can make it through anything if you do have the right support and community and have tools to help you through that.
And I would say it'd be really awesome to share like one main way that and I can share one for me, to like connect with yourself. Like we talked about somatic healing, and that was a
Mhm.
huge game changer in my nervous system shift. to be able to
Mhm.
be a more grounded, self-confident, like just this person is able to hold myself and carry myself through life, you know? That's one
Yes, that's
thing.
wonderful. Yeah, what's one thing for me that helps me connect to my body?
Mhm.
I'm gonna say 2 things because 'cause they're, like, so intertwined.
Mhm.
Yoga for me, when you are able to be in your body and say, "This hour, hour and a half is for me,"
Yeah.
you're connecting your body with your breath, you're connecting with all the sensations and emotions in your body, and you can't run from them. You have to stay with them in this hour-long period. And then also, I have a processing emotions meditation. I do it every single
Mhm.
day, and it helps you to get out of the monkey mind a little bit and helps redirect you to your body, through your sensations, what emotions are coming up, and if it's a big trigger is happening, you can then soothe that inner child, what age it's at, what feelings are they, what feelings do you have, what beliefs do you have about in this moment, and you're ultimately rescuing this inner child with somatic exercises like self hold,
Oh,
so giving yourself a hug, rocking back and forth, breath work. So these are all things to help get you out of that fight or flight state, out of that
love
symptom,
that.
yeah, out of
We
that
didn't even talk about inner
setting.
child, but man, that's so much a
Yeah.
part of it.
It is. It is. Because when you are
It really
triggered in
is.
this if you are
Mhm.
triggered in this moment as a 34-year-old, for example, and something big, it's overtaking you, that's coming from a 4-year-old version of you.
Mhm.
Anything that you have a big response to is
Pay
a
attention.
yeah, it's a historical thing, not typically it's not what's happening in the
Yes.
present day. It's
Yes. That's
reminding
such
you
a
of
good.
something.
There's been times where I've just been like, why is my reaction to this so big? You know, if you're like,
Mhm.
why am this seems like if you can get to that space, you know, because some
Mhm.
people struggle, but like if you do find yourself like reacting to something that just is like, okay, why am I, what is this? And sometimes it's hard, but even just practicing that inquiry, you'd be surprised at what might come in then, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
just opening up to the possibility of it.
Yeah, and to, like, my suggestion for people, if you do struggle with a big emotional flashback or a big reaction to something happening in the present day, is we try to first rationalize, like, why is this happening? But first, just notice what sensations are coming up
Hmm.
for you, what emotions are really stored there. Maybe it's pressure in your chest, heat in your head, tension in your shoulders, heaviness in your body, and just notice it with curiosity. And then when you're feeling more regulated and integrated, as we've talked about, that's when you can really have those compassionate inquiries of, hmm, what is this
Hmm.
reminding me of? If this, if, my beating heart that feels like it's beating out of my chest, if it had a voice, what would it say?
Yes, those are really great journaling inquiries. And that's something that like I'll often do is, you know, like you, I think the power of noticing, I can't say, and that would have been one of my things is like, just notice being in my body. Like, so taking a breath and just noticing like what is coming up.
Mhm,
That's my go-to connection. And it's such a simple thing, but it's so important to just pay attention, you know?
mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Even if it's for 1 minute, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
1 minute, in the morning, 1 minute in the evening, because we're all busy, we all have things to do. But when you can make that connection
Anytime. Yeah.
anytime,
Yeah. Because it's just like a little check-in. Like, okay, like, hi. I'm
that's
here right now.
that's
What's
when
my
you
state?
become exactly. That's when you become the securely attached parent to yourself that you needed as a
Hmm.
child.
Yes. We should have a whole other conversation about this in parenting. Because really, my
Hmm.
experience, you know, really started as a parent. I think that is a catalyst experience for a lot of people, and then they start working through that trauma recovery. And people don't understand how exhausting and difficult that really is to do that, even with support. Like it just the change and all that's happening in your body that you're going through as you're trying to now parent and not be, you know, yeah.
Absolutely. That can be one of the hardest things if we've had unhealed childhood trauma, because it's like it mirrors that child mirrors everything we did or didn't get. And so if your child is crying, it could it could dysregulate you. It could bring up things within you that weren't healed. And that's
And you
just
don't
a
even
huge
know.
catalyst.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I think we covered everything. I really appreciate spending this time with you. I feel like there's so much more that we could get into. So it'd be awesome. Maybe I'll join you on your podcast, which your podcast, by the way, is the Anxiety Recovery Podcast, right?
Yes, the Anxiety Recovery Podcast by Valerie Rubin.
And people can find you on Instagram at Heal with Val, and where else?
Yeah, so they can find me there. They can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Valerie Rubin. You can find me on Facebook as well at Valerie Rubin. I'd love to have you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of All the Things.